How you doing? I'd like to welcome everybody to the Mainland Planning Commission for Monday, April 10th. We will start with the Invocation and Pledge. If you'd like to join us, please stand.
Let us pray. Father, we thank you, Lord, for this wonderful day. We thank you, Father, for the privilege of discussing matters that are important to our community. We just pray, God, that the decisions that are made are honoring to you and, Father, will benefit our community. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll start off with the review of the meeting procedures. The Planning Commission hears requests for preliminary subdivision plats and site plans. The Planning Commission conducts public hearings on rezonings, certain planning documents, and ordinance amendments. The Planning Commission makes final decisions on preliminary plats and site plans, makes recommendations to the Board of Commissioners on all other items. The planning staff presents the case to the Planning Commission during the staff report. The report evaluates how the proposal conforms to the Glynn County Comprehensive Plan, zoning ordinance, and other applicable regulations. Applicants shall have the opportunity to present their request to the Planning Commission. It is the responsibility of the applicant to make presentations on requests and to address any conditions or factual findings with which they do not agree. Public hearings will be limited to 30 minutes for each opposing side. Comments are to be limited to relevant information regarding your position and should avoid being repetitious. If your group has a spokesperson, please allow that individual to present your group's position in the time allotted. The applicant may then provide a rebuttal to any testimony. The chairman may terminate testimony if it becomes repetitive. The chairman may terminate a speaker's time if the speaker begins personal attacks. Your cooperation in this process is greatly appreciated. General business, approval of the minutes for the regular meeting held February 7th, 2017, subject to any necessary corrections.
Move to approve.
Got a motion?
Second.
And a second. Further discussion? All in favor signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. First public hearing item is going to be a special use permit. It's SUP 3432 Myers Hill Farm Road. Consider request for special use permit to allow for farm-based activities such as farm-to-table dinners, you-pick gardens, family reunions, educational events, weddings, harvest celebrations, and seasonal farmers markets. The property is owned FA and is located on Myers Hill Road, parcel ID 03-10189. Brooke and Paul Roberts, applicants and owners. Welcome.
Can you get me to the desktop, David, please? Thank you. Good evening. I'm Pamela Thompson, Director of Community Development. Thank you all for coming this evening. Our first public hearing is a request for a special use permit, SUP 3432 Myers Hill Farm Road. I'm sorry, I'm letting the computer catch up with me a moment. This is a special use permit for farm-based activities. The applicant has asked you to consider a request for special use permit to allow for farm-based activities such as farm-to-table dinners, you-pick garden, family reunions, educational events, weddings, harvest celebrations, and seasonal farmer market. The applicant is planning to build their home on the property and develop a working farm that will be self-supporting. This is a location map of the property. This is a photograph of the property from the street. This property is 48.21 acres, is currently zoned forest agricultural and is undeveloped. Again, the applicant proposes to have a working farm, and the comp plan calls for this to be medium-density residential. For zoning, the minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet, 5 acres for public assembly, and you see the other detailings on setbacks. The owners will live on site. The proposed structures are located away from lot lines, and the driveway will have a gate to secure the property when events are not held. This is a picture of the property showing the location, the 2 white squares. One is the proposed home site, one is the event site. The 2 areas in green is the working garden and pasture area. These are the questions addressed in the staff report. This property is located approximately 1 mile from Highway 82 and has direct access from Meyer Hill Road, which is a 2-lane county road. The property is almost 50 acres in size. The barn site and associated activities will be located in the back corner of the property. There's ample room to accommodate parking. Per the Glynn County zoning ordinance, signs will comply with Article 7 of the ordinance. As a working farm, open space will be plentiful. The primary use will be farming, supported by special farm-based events. The proposed structures are located away from property lines, and the adjacent properties are undeveloped. The hours will be event-specific and by appointment only. A gate will be located at the driveway, which will enforce the by appointment only access. The applicant will submit a lighting plan with the building permit application in order to comply with Glynn County ordinances and regulations. Access to the property will be provided from Myers Hill Road. Farming is a permitted use in the FA district. Public assembly is allowed as a special use on parcels of 5 acres or more. And again, the surrounding area is primarily undeveloped with low-density single-family residential. Staff has determined this application is complete and contains all the information required by the zoning ordinance. Staff recommends approval of application SUP 3432. These are your possible motions. This is a public hearing, and the applicant is available if you have any questions. And staff is happy to take questions also.
I guess this is sort of we'll have sort of a semi-commercial use with this, but we talked about the parking regulations. I guess they don't necessarily apply. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of parking, seeing how they're going to have fields and...
Initially, they plan to not have any event that would have more than 100 people, and based on the event would be the parking regulations, but when they apply for their building permits, we'll make sure that there's enough area that's cleared and is suitable for parking.
Okay. Staff thought about any buffers or any requirements for the buildings as far as being a certain distance from a property line other than the zoning setbacks, I guess, if you got a lot of people and...
We did not, because the proposed location in that map on the screen may not have been that clear. Where they're proposing the location, we feel there's adequate buffer between them and their surrounding property lines.
Okay, and that'll be addressed when they submit come in for a building permit?
Yes, sir.
I mean, if they push it right up to the setback,
yes,
there'll be
sir.
some comments on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Questions for staff?
So the farm-to-table dinners, that's not open to public, it's just private only, is that correct?
Correct.
But they must be charging something.
Yes, sir. This is a means, number one, of exposing people to farm operations and how farms, all the things that you can do at a farm, but it is to provide a second source of revenue to make this truly a working farm.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Would the applicant please come forward and request action on this application? If you would, state your name for the record at the podium.
Hi, my name is Brooke Roberts. This is my husband, Paul Roberts, and my daughter, Samantha Roberts. And we would like to request the application to go forward, please.
Okay. I know there's similar type venues in Glynn County, usually that for ceremonies and things, not necessarily the farming and all that. I have been to one of the field-to-table events that somebody else put on around here, very nice. Will there be any other, I guess if a large company came by and said, we'd like you to provide the space for, I guess, Christmas parties or something like that, that's a possibility also?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, to a limited number. First and foremost, this is going to be our home. This is going to be where
Sure.
we're going to be living and raising our daughters. So we're not looking to have enormous amounts of people out there because that's just not the lifestyle we're looking for. And I imagine it's one of those things to grow. We kind of are getting into it and starting really small, and it could always grow a little bigger, and we would come back at that point and if it started to become something really big, then we would come back and readdress that. But that is not what our plan is.
Yeah, I think it's a great use for the property, low impact also. Any questions for the applicant?
Are there any requirements from the state or health department or anything to have something like this on your property?
So, I've had lots of conversations with lots of different departments, and to be honest, everybody I talk to gives me slightly different answers, so it's been a little interesting trying to figure this out. Most of what we're planning on doing is we don't want any of the liability with food, to be honest, personally, ourselves. So if there are farm-to-table events, what it would be doing, we'd be inviting a chef who has a local restaurant to come and use our produce, and then they would be taking it back to their facility, cooking it, and then presenting it on site, because we don't want any cooking or anything like that done on our property, because then that puts the responsibility back on us commercially for a kitchen, and we just don't want that. That's not what we're trying to do. So there's a possibility for that, and then that falls back on them as far as, food safety and that sort of thing. Agriculturally, we've had other conversations with the state because of what we're going to be doing ourselves, kind of selling. And we're going to be doing primarily a lot of microgreens and a lot of salad greens and things like that. And there are some different regulations that we have to comply with on that sort of front. But that would be if we were to set up like a little storefront and actually start selling, goods off the property. But I really don't foresee that either. We're not looking to have just general foot traffic onto the property. We're kind of looking to do very established, small little events.
And I'm sure environmental health will have their 2 cents when you
We
go
have
to-
talked to them at great length.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Are you going to use city water or sewer or private water and private septic?
It is on the county line, but they are telling us because we're so far off the road, we'd have to build a private main, and to be honest, it's pretty cost prohibitive. So we're going to be doing a well, and then obviously we've talked to environmental health about the septic, and so once we do our building plan, then we'll be going back to them, and they'll be telling us what size we need and how to place it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
All right. This is a public hearing item. Is there anybody that wishes to speak in favor concerning this application?
Let me take off my headset here.
Yes, sir. Please
I'm
state your
Julian
name.
Smith. I live on St. Simon's Island. I support this. I approve of this. I think it's a wonderful idea. I introduced myself to the Roberts before the meeting and explained that although I'm supportive of what they're doing, I have some comments to make about the staff work that is before you. I want to start by noticing that the author of the staff report is not identified, so we don't know who we should hold responsible for it. And in looking at the findings, I see some problems. For instance, the first finding has to do with the effect the proposed activity will have on traffic flow along adjoining streets. And the problem here is that the staff comments do not address the effect on traffic flow. I'm going to read you the staff comment, which is non-responsive. The property is located approximately 1 mile from Highway 82 and has direct access from Mire Hill Road a two-lane county road. Now, I doubt that there will ever be such a large event that traffic will be backed up to 82 or to the interstate. But this statement is not a finding having to do with the effect. I think there'll be very little effect, but I'm not the one who wrote the staff report. The location of the off-street parking facilities. The property is almost 50 acres in size, we're told. There's ample room to accommodate parking, but the site plan typically requires that the location of off-street parking facilities be identified. They are not identified here. I'm sure they will be identified at some later point, but it would be better if the staff had told the applicant you need to identify or should identify the parking area. I'll skip over signs. The amount and location of open space. And the staff report is, as a working farm, open space will be plentiful. But let me read you the definition from the zoning ordinance of open space. This is what how the county defines it. As an area of land or water essentially unimproved and set aside, dedicated, designated, or reserved for the common use or enjoyment of an active or passive recreation facility. Open space areas shall not be occupied by non-recreational areas or structures, nor shall they include the yards established for setbacks in this ordinance. I call your attention specifically to an area of land set aside, dedicated, designated, or reserved. There is no dedication, there is no indication of the land that is set aside for open space. I think it would have been prudent for staff to have required that on the site plan. There are other things I could say about the application, but I'm sure you're going to approve it. But I would like to point out, in relation to this application and the other public hearings, that the agenda for this meeting was not posted until Friday, and that the reports attached to the agenda could not be opened by members of the public until this morning. That gives us very little time, members of the public, very little time to study these applications, which may be why there are not a lot of people here to speak at these public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of this application? Seeing none, anybody wishing to speak against this application? Seeing none. Commissioners?
I move to recommend approval of SUP 3432 to the Board of Commissioners with the recommended staff additions included.
Second. You got a motion and a second?
I second the motion.
There's a second down there.
Commissioner Edgy? Yeah. Further discussion? All in favor, signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Pam, when will this go to the county commission?
I'm going to have to double check the legal ad. I think it goes to May 4th,
Okay.
which is the first Thursday.
Thank you. Next item is also a public hearing item, conditional use permit, CUP 3452, CKELJ Storage. Consider request for a conditional use permit to allow for enclosed RV storage and mini storage. The property is zoned PD Southport and is located at 216 Southport.
Parkway.
Really supposed to be Parkway.
Parkway.
Okay. CKELG LLC, applicant and owner, Pete Schonauer, Tidewater Engineering agent.
Yes, sir. Thank you. This application, CUP 3452, is related to the next agenda item, which is Site Plan 3437. So they are being shown together for use when making the consideration. This is a conditional use permit to allow mini storage in the Southport planning development. That is its location, just a vicinity map. There's a more detailed property map showing you the property. This area is 2.12 acres. It is zoned PD. It's undeveloped. The proposed land use is mini storage, and the future land use map labels this area as regional center. The zoning district standards, minimum lot size, 6,000 square feet. It's got width and setbacks. Many warehouses are a conditional use in this zoning district with a lot size of 3 acres or less, consisting of 10 units or more, adequate buffers, and direct access to a major street or controlled access highway. Here are photographs of the property from the main street. And this is a photograph of the existing warehouses on the adjacent property. This is the site plan. You've got a full-size copy of that at your desk this evening. And the numbers you see on there will go over in more detail for the site plan, but this is just showing you the site plan has been found compliant by staff. And here are the conditional use standards. Southport Parkway provides adequate access. The site is also located in close proximity to Highway 82, Highway 17, and Interstate 95. The zoning district does not have open space requirements. A grassed area is provided along the eastern side of the property adjacent to Southport Parkway. This area is zoned planned development for highway commercial use. The adjacent properties are undeveloped, a mini storage facility, and an RV park. Security fencing will be provided around the perimeter of the property. The front of the property will include a multi-stem crepe myrtles planting for screening. Hours of operation will be Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturdays, 9 a.m. to noon. Outdoor lighting will be submitted along with the commercial building permit and will be in compliance with county codes. Access to the property will be provided through the adjacent mini storage site. The existing fence will remain and a gate provided between the two properties. This proposed use is compatible with the surrounding land use. Staff has determined that this application is complete and contains all the information required by the Glynn County zoning ordinance. Staff recommends approval of CUP 3432. And there is your possible motion. This is a public hearing. Staff is available to answer questions, and the agent is here this evening also.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for staff? Nope. Okay. Would the applicant please come forward and request action? Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Peter Schonauer with Tidewater Engineering, acting as the agent for CKELJ LLC, the owner and developer of this project. Ms. Thompson did a good job explaining what we are proposing to do here, and I'm here to request a recommendation for approval of the CUP.
Looks like this is really not anything different than what they're doing out there on adjacent properties at this time, other than, I guess, it's covered storage for RVs?
It's going to be enclosed covered storage, similar to what's just south of there, and climate-controlled mini storage as well.
And access is through the adjacent property also?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So they would share the common office when they're, checking in and leasing units and things.
Okay, makes sense. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll call you if we need you. This is a public hearing item. Is there anyone that wishes to speak in favor of this conditional use permit? Seeing none. Anyone wishing to speak against this conditional use permit?
Let me turn this off
Thank you.
or put it down. I'm Julian Smith. Again, I live on St. Simons still, and I'm going to speak in opposition to this application, not so much in opposition to what is proposed, but in opposition to the incompleteness of the application. The Director of Community Development told you that the application is complete, and I'm going to suggest it is not. Once again, I point out that the author of this staff document is not indicated. It might be a joint document written by a committee, but we don't know. We are told on the background information that this property is part of the Southport Plan Development attached. I assume a word has been left out, plan development text or something else, attached, but there is no attached document showing us this plan development. We are told that one of the standards for a conditional use for this type of facility is direct access to a major street or controlled access highway. There is no direct access to a highway or a street. There is no easement provided. There is no access information on site plan. If you look at what Mr. Schoenhauer has provided, maybe you can see it on your big copy, but on the one I have here, I don't see any access from the highway. I don't see any access across the separate parcel, which is 3.6 acres. And if you look at these two parcels, which are owned by different entities that have the same mailing address, this is more than 5 acres. And such a facility must be on a lot size of 3 acres or less. So perhaps the reason why there are two separate entities here, two separate properties, is that the owner, the common owner, who lives behind two different identities, doesn't want to go over, doesn't want to be denied this because they're two separate properties, because the property is too large. The ingress, the first finding of fact, and I'll only talk about two, has to do with the effect the proposed activity will have on traffic flow. And once again, we have a non-responsive staff comment that Southport Parkway provides adequate access. It certainly does, but the access, that has nothing to do with the effect of the proposed activity. Number 8, ingress and egress of the property.
Can I ask you a question then?
I'm sorry, you have a question.
Yes, what would your response be then to the proposed activity have on traffic flow?
God forbid I should be on community development staff in a county that's already developed, perhaps even overdeveloped. I would say that the number of people coming to store their vehicles, long-term storage of their vehicles indoor, which is what is being proposed here. Am I correct?
Yes.
It's unlikely that there's going to be a lot of additional traffic unless these people are actually living in these RVs in the storage. And then there might be daily traffic. But no, I don't think there's going to be any access, any effect on traffic.
Right. You're looking for an affirmative statement as to will it or will it not affect.
Well, I think the county staff should be held responsible for making a statement that we can rely on. And if it turns out they make a statement, oh, there's not going to be a lot of increased traffic, then we need to say, oops, you made a mistake. And then as a planning commission, you might be more likely in the future to be leery of unsupported statements. I would not, if I was sitting on this board, I would not demand or ask or request a traffic study.
No.
It's not necessary in this case. But I'm getting tired of seeing these findings that don't find anything. And let's go to number 8, ingress and egress to the property. Access to the property will be provided through the adjacent mini storage site. But we're not showing where the gate area is that separates the fence separating the two properties. We're not shown, as I said before, where traffic is going to come off the highway in relation, for instance, to other driveways and so on. In some counties, you can have only one driveway every so many feet or yards. So I'm sure this would be a useful facility, but I think you should turn this down until you have better and more accurate information in front of you, and until the staff has told you things that you can rely on. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Shornow, would you like to address any of those comments?
Good evening. My name is Jim Bonds, and I'm the applicant for CKELJ Storage, which is a separate entity. CKELJ, that stands for Cameron, Catherine, Elizabeth, Laura, and Jim Bonds. And the Catherine, Cameron, and Elizabeth are our kids, and they each have 25% of it. And so we decided, we're going to go ahead and build something up and do something for their future in an area which I think is ideal for storage. What I like about it is it is low usage. There's a lot of RV parking there, and the RV has been an exciting venture for us in that we've had a lot of people coming down to Glynn County for years, going over to Jekyll Island, putting their RVs over there, and they're getting older, 80, 90 years old, and they still do it because now they're bringing them over to our place. They get a couple of people to bring them on over from Blythe, go across the street to Earl Perry, who has a great campground over there, one of the best in the state. And so it's been kind of a central area where more and more people are coming in. We've got about 100 recreational vehicles now, and it's been ideal for them. They get to come on down to Glynn County longer and longer. They spend their money here. They keep their vehicles here year-round rather than moving them back up. We bring the access in through the regular storage, and I like doing that because we've got one access gate, and so we have just one culvert. That's really good for the county. It's good for us where you restrict water flow through the drainage ditches, and we have all our cameras up there, so it keeps it really secure. But the facility as a whole is very, very wide. We've got real wide drives, 27 feet wide. There's part of our place where you can keep a tractor trailer back there. So in terms of access in and access out, that's really pretty good. It is a separate entity, and it will pay up, and it satisfies, I believe, the terms that Glynn County requires in terms of setbacks for that separate entity, the screening and plants, the setbacks, and everything to do with setting up the building permit. I can't remember all the questions or objections we may have had on it, but in terms of the entity, I wanted to explain that, and in terms of the access, mention that too. Do you all have any questions for me?
Well, the access actually to this site will be at the rear of the site. They'll come in.
Yes.
And go almost all the way to the back and then
Yes.
pull into the gravel surface area?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Is there anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Bonds. Anyone else wishing to speak out against this conditional use permit? Seeing none. Commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval to the Board of Commissioners of Conditional Use Application CUP 3452 as presented.
Second.
Got a motion in 2 seconds. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Preliminary plats, vacations, none. Site plans, SP 3437 CKEL. Is it I or J?
J.
J. Storage, consider site plan approval for enclosed RV storage and mini storage. The property is zoned PD Southport and is located at 216 Southport Parkway. The property is 2.12 acres. CKELJ LLC, applicant and owner, Pete Schonauer, Tidewater Engineering Agent.
Yes, sir, and thank you. This site plan is being put before you. It would, if you recommend approval, it would be contingent on the conditional use permit being approved by the Board of Commissioners. That will be on their May 4th meeting. This is the same property we were just speaking about, and you have the full-size site plan at your desk. As we walk through the requirements for information required on a site plan, this is the name of the project and the owner-developer. The north arrow and the scale, the vicinity map, total area and acreage in the development, and the zoning district. Okay, several are seen up here. The zoning of contiguous properties is zoned, the boundary survey shown. Let's see here. This is the flood note. There were no existing proposed easement locations. This is the required setbacks for that district. Existing streets, building, water bodies, beaches, dunes, and marsh. Existing stormwater drainage structures. Locations, dimensions, building areas, and uses of all proposed buildings and structures. These are the proposed elevations. The location of any existing or proposed underground. No, I'm sorry, this is parking, curb cuts, vehicular access, and circulation. Buffer dimensions and composition. Signage will comply with our code ordinance. And project phasing. Outdoor lighting will be in compliance with code, and there are no specimen trees on the site. It is signed. Staff has found that this application is complete and satisfactorily complies with all applicable codes and ordinances. Staff recommends approval of site plan 3437 contingent on the conditional use permit for this site being approved by the Board of Commissioners. Staff is available if you have any questions, and the agent is available if you have any questions.
Any questions for staff? Thank you. Would the applicant please come forward and request action? One more time.
Hello again, Peter Schonauer with Tidewater Engineering, and I'm here to request that you vote to approve the site plan.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This is not a public hearing item. I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve application SP 3437 as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second, and this is conditional upon the approval of the special use permit. Excuse me, conditional use permit. Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Next site plan item, SP 3445, Oak Grove Island Shed 2. Consider site plan approval for facility storage for use of golf course. One shed is currently in construction plan phase. The site plan modification is to allow for a second 2,100 square foot storage building to house fertilizer and some bins to store sand for use in golf course maintenance. Heritage Oaks Golf Club LLC, applicant and owner, Burt Etheridge, Roberts Engineering Agent. Ms. Thompson.
Yes, sir, thank you. You have a full size of this site plan at your desk. This is the location map, and One storage facility has already received site plan approval. This is adding a second storage facility. This is located between fairways 12 and 13 in the Oak Grove Golf Course. It's 10.1 acres. It is a planned development, the Oak Grove Plantation. It is for golf course storage. Here are pictures of the property. This is the site plan. Again, you have a full size at your desk. And as we go through, staff has reviewed this for compliance with our ordinance. And we are just pointing your attention to the areas where we found on the site plan that they met the various areas of the code. As you can see, they are augmenting the natural buffer with some plantings. There will be no signage for this site, and it is stamped by a professional. Staff has found that this application is complete and recommend approval of Site Plan 3445 as presented. Those are your possible motions. Staff is available if you have any questions, and the agent's available if you have any questions.
I feel like we should have been counting along as we went through the numbers through there. So, any questions for the staff? Pretty straightforward. Thank you. Would the applicant please come forward and request action?
My name is Bert Etheridge. I'm representing Robert Civil Engineering and Heritage Oaks Golf Club, and I am requesting a recommendation for approval.
Any more sheds in the near future?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
It's, I think the rest of the site may be used for grassing, for implanting for the golf course. So if they have like...
sort of a nursery style?
Right. It'll
Okay.
just be a big grass field, and they'll cut chunks out of it and take it and put it where it needs to be in the golf
Sod
course.
farm.
Sod farm. That's it.
Gotcha. Okay. Any questions for the applicant?
Does this impact any current or future residences adjacent to or near the property?
And those are in the first site plan approval. Y'all or the committee prior to y'all had us put in a fair amount of plantings, and those plantings would not be disturbed by this shed. It's hundreds of trees and large
So there are
bushes.
no adjoining residences next to it?
No, there's no adjoining residences. It's like an island unto itself. It's surrounded by a golf course, and then you have residents on the other side of the golf course.
Any more questions for the applicant? Thank you, Bert.
Thank you.
This is not a public hearing item. I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve application Site Plan 3445 as presented.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. Sorry. Had a moment. Yeah, thank you. So, all in favor of the motion, signify by raising your right hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Last item is a public hearing item, text amendments. TA 3479, St. Simons Island Tree Canopy Preservation. An amendment to amend and replace Section 624 of the zoning ordinance of Glynn County, Georgia, to provide for preservation, planting, and replacement of trees to protect and preserve the tree canopy of St. Simons Island and for other purposes.
Good evening, Commissioners. For those of you who have not met me, I'm Assistant County Attorney Will Worley, and I'm here tonight to give you all a presentation on the proposed St. Simons Island Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance. To give you a little bit of background on how we got to where we are today, In the spring of 2015, our office drafted a comprehensive rewrite of the existing tree ordinance for St. Simons Island and presented it to the Board of Commissioners at a work session. They weren't happy with that version of the ordinance that came to them, and they had appointed an ad hoc committee to create a new ordinance. Some members of that committee include some of your fellow planning commissioners from the Island Planning Commission, Joel Willis and Stan Humphreys. From your own planning commission, Mr. Murphy was on that committee. From the Tree Advisory Board, we had Charles Taylor and Cesar Rodriguez. From the Golden Isles Fund for Trees, we had Miriam Lancaster. The developer representative was Mr. Brad Brumbach, and on staff we had myself and Dr. Don Gardner, our local extension agent, volunteered his services as a invaluable scientific resource for that committee. The committee very quickly decided that the best thing to do was to come up with concepts rather than a full-fledged ordinance to present to the board and get their buy-in before we actually started drafting the ordinance. So over the course of a year or so, we met several times to come up with those concepts. Last spring, we presented those concepts to the Board of Commissioners, which they okayed and gave us the go-ahead to start drafting the actual ordinance, which is where we are today, and that's what y'all are here to consider tonight. So I'm going to run through the provisions of the ordinance, and then if y'all don't mind, if you would ask your questions at the end, I think maybe that'll be a little bit better. So the first thing I want to talk about is what this ordinance applies to and what the requirements are for those applicable properties. So this ordinance will only apply as currently drafted on St. Simons Island. It does not apply to the mainland. The reason y'all are hearing it is because our zoning ordinance requires that all text amendments go to both planning commissions before it goes to the Board of Commissioners. There's 5 different sets of property that this ordinance will apply to. Residential property of 1 acre or more, all commercial property, and all industrial property on St. Simons Island. For those properties that are listed there, a tree plan approved by the Islands Planning Commission will be required prior to being able to apply for a site plan, a building permit, a preliminary plat, expedited subdivision, a land disturbance permit, or before clearing the property, which we define as the removal of trees 6 inches or larger. Some other categories of property that are affected by this are properties that are in the Island Preservation District. Does not matter what size lot we're talking about, so it can be less than 1 acre. And contiguous lots, substandard lots of record. So if there is a house or building or other structure built on or across lot lines on 2 or more substandard lots of record, if you want to come in and get a demolition permit to demo that house, or in some cases what happens is those lots have been combined into one tax parcel, even though they're separate lots. People come in and want those separated. So if those 2 triggering actions, either demolishing the structure or asking that the 2 lots be separated into separate tax parcels, will trigger the requirement of an approved tree plan before you can get that demolition permit or before you can get those lots separated. And then finally, this applies to all property on St. Simons Island, that if you want to remove a live oak that's 24 inches in diameter or greater, you don't have to get an approved tree plan, but you do have to come in and have a consultation with the county arborist, which is a position which will be created under this proposal. And the county arborist will sit down and suggest some different ways to go about what it is you want to do to try to preserve that tree. You're not required to follow those recommendations, but you are required to have that consultation with the county arborist before you cut down the tree, expand your house, whatever action it is you're taking that would necessitate taking down that tree. So let's talk about the preservation requirements. Most tree ordinances go about measuring the tree canopy either by measuring the canopy itself or measuring the diameter of the trees that are out there. And, you know, they have different formulas. You have to have so many diameter of trees, or you have to have so much canopy. One of the things the committee learned was that there's a direct correlation between the amount of open soil area you provide for a tree and the amount of canopy that tree will provide, and it's a 2-to-1 ratio. So for every square foot of open soil area around a tree you provide, you'll get 2 square feet of canopy. The goal was to hopefully preserve at least a 50% tree canopy on St. Simon's Island. And so in order to meet that goal, the preservation requirement for the applicable property is that at least 25% of the development area of that property has to be left open and preserved for the dedication of the growth of trees. Open means it can't be covered by permeable surfaces, it can't be developed, it can't be used for buildings, things like that. You plant your tree, you leave the area around it open and you protect it, and that's how you get your 25% open soil area. In order to meet your 25% requirement, you can retain existing trees on the property or you can plant new trees. If you retain specimen trees, which are trees that for some, they are unique in some way or in other ways have been designated a specimen tree, you get extra credit for those. So for every square foot that you keep open for a specimen tree, you'll get 1.25 square feet of credit for that. If you preserve a tree, you're required to preserve at least the critical root zone of that tree. When you submit your tree plan, you will get credit for the actual amount of area you have provided for that preserved tree. For planted trees, we have some minimum soil areas, as you can see there. So for a large canopy tree, you have to retain a 1,500 square feet area for that tree in order to get credit for it. For medium canopy trees, it's 550 square feet, and for small canopy trees, it's 250 square feet. In addition to providing that open area, you have to establish and maintain protection zones during development of the property. The protection zone will be an area that will be fenced off so that people, equipment, things like that can't get into that open soil area and compact the soil, can't damage the trunk or cause other injuries to the tree that would damage it or kill it. Those have to be kept up during the development process, and then after the development, those trees have to be maintained, those areas have to be maintained again in an open soil area. You can't cover them with anything to prevent water, air, and things like that from getting in those. If there is a tree on public property adjacent to a private piece of property and the critical root zone of that public tree extends onto the private property, the private property owner will be required to maintain that critical root zone on their property, and they'll get credit for that. And in addition to protecting the tree during development, there's an ongoing obligation to maintain the health of the tree in order to retain that canopy requirement. And again, that ongoing responsibility is, you can't go in and start parking your cars under the tree to compact the soil. You can't do other things that would impact that area that's supposed to be kept open around the tree that could lead to the death of the tree. So there's going to be a tree plan review process. I'm going to run you through the steps of that right now. So again, this all has to be done on the front end before you can come in and ask for the permits that we listed earlier. The applicant will submit a tree plan to the county arborist for review. The county arborist will review that for completeness and look to make sure they meet the requirements of the ordinance. Right now, the plan is that, again, Dr. Gardner has been, he's been very good to volunteer to be the initial county arborist under this plan, at least for the first couple of years to get it off the ground. The tree plan, after review by the county arborist, will go to the tree board for review and recommendation. The tree board will then make a recommendation to the Islands Planning Commission. And then the Islands Planning Commission can either approve, deny that tree plan that's put before them. If they deny it, then the applicant can appeal that denial to the Board of Commissioners. And if it's approved, then they can come into community development and apply for whatever permit or other development action that they're asking to do. The tree plan requirement is very similar to some of your site plan requirements. In addition to a lot of that information, the applicant will need to show the current and proposed tree canopy on the site. They need to show a tree survey of all trees on the site that are 6 inches in diameter or greater. They will be required to submit photos of specimen trees, photos of the trees that are going to be removed and the trees that are going to be preserved. They'll have a calculation of the open soil area both before and after development, and they will have to show the location of any Glynn County trees. And again, Glynn County trees are trees that are growing on Glynn County property where the critical root zone extends onto private property. So this is just a formula for how an applicant will calculate their tree canopy requirement. So they're going to take their site area, divide it by 4, subtract the square footage dedicated for preserved trees, and then whatever that total is, they will then have to plant trees in order to meet those requirements. And I'm going to run you through an example of one to show you how it's going to work. So step 1, you take your total site from a boundary survey in square feet. We're going to use, for ease, a 1 acre site, 43,560 square feet. You divide that by 4 to get the requirement that you have to have for your open soil area. So in this case, it's 10,890 square feet of that 1 acre lot has to be dedicated as open soil area for the growth of trees. If the applicant preserves an area on the site equal to 5,500 square feet, that's what the trees are going to keep. Subtract that from their requirement, and they have to plant or dedicate to the planted trees 5,390 square feet. So then it becomes a matter of choosing the trees that you want to plant in order to meet your requirement. So in this example, 2 large canopy trees, you have to maintain at least 1,500 square feet for those, 3 medium canopy trees at 550 square feet, and 3 small canopy trees at 250 square feet get you 5,400 square feet of planted trees, so 8 trees, and then adding that to your preserved area, you have met or slightly exceeded your requirement for the open soil area dedicated to the growth of trees. The committee, foresaw some instances where there may be a hardship for people to meet these requirements, so we came up with some alternative compliance methods. And the alternative compliance method that is proposed is offsite planting. Residential and commercial properties can take advantage of offsite planting. They have to plant on St. Simons. It can't be somewhere else in the county. For residential property, the owner can use offsite planting with the concurrence of the county arborist and the Island Planning Commission. If it's a commercial property of less than 1 acre, they again can use offsite planting for up to half of their canopy requirement without the need for Island Planning Commission approval. Now that doesn't mean their tree plan doesn't have to be approved. It just means that they can take advantage of that offsite planting compliance method without having to get special approval from the Island Planning Commission. However, for 1 acre or more, if it's a commercial property, because that's a larger lot and then theoretically applicants should have more room to meet their requirements, if they want to use offsite planting, they can again use it to meet up to half of their requirement, but they need a special approval from the IPC for that. One of the big issues with the current tree ordinance and when we ran these through town hall meetings and workshops was the idea of penalties. So generally speaking, counties can only create misdemeanors by ordinance violation. We can't create felonies. And a misdemeanor, the punishment is capped at $1,000 or 60 days in jail. A lot of times there were suggestions that we exponentially increase those fines, fines of $10,000, things like that. We just simply can't do that under the law. So we had to get a little bit more creative on the penalties. One thing we did do is, because these are misdemeanor violations, rather than just leave it up to the judge to determine what the violation was or what the penalty was. We put some minimum fines in there, as you can see. So for the first violation, $500, second violation, $750, and then a minimum of $900 for a third violation. In addition to the misdemeanor penalties, a stop work order can be issued on a site where it's determined that during the development process they are not adhering to their approved tree plan. The arborist can request that community development revoke any building permits or site plans or anything else that have been approved for that site if there's a violation of the tree plan until such time as that violation is remedied. If, for instance, a tree that is supposed to be preserved on a piece of property is cut down and the owner or someone comes in to try to build upon that site, they will not be able to. That tree, that area that's supposed to be dedicated to that tree shall be left in an undeveloped condition in perpetuity. Trees that are removed or damaged have to be replaced at a rate of 1 1/4. So for instance, if you were to take down a 1-inch tree, you'd have to replace it with a 1 1/4-inch tree. And then of course, the bigger the tree, the bigger that goes. So basically there's a 25% penalty on that if you take down a tree. And then in addition to the owners of the property being able to be cited, tree trimming companies, contractors, other parties that are responsible for the violation can be cited in addition to the property owner. One of the issues that was talked about and put in here is the matter of heritage trees. Heritage trees are trees that are special in some way, either because of their historical, commemorative value, they're special horticulturally, or there's some sort of event or things like that that makes them a special tree. There was a lot of kind of dissent on this in the committee, but ultimately what we came up with was the owner of a piece of property can petition the tree board for a tree to be designated as a heritage tree on their property. If the tree board agrees that it's a heritage tree, then that tree cannot be removed without the permission of Glynn County. And that applies even if the property changes hands. So what we're going to do is if a tree is designated as a heritage tree, then the owner of the property has to record a document in the property records so that subsequent buyers know that there's a tree designated as a heritage tree on the property. GIS is going to create a heritage tree layer on the Cube Public website, and those will be a record of those will be kept there so that if someone's going and looking at a parcel of land, if there's a heritage tree on that piece of property, it'll show up on the Cube Public. Now, we do have a mechanism in here so that a heritage tree designation can be removed. The owner can come in and ask that it be removed. The tree board will consider that request. If they deny that request, then that person can then appeal that to the Board of Commissioners.
Uh-oh.
See if I can find out. And then another provision that was added to this was for existing commercial properties that are destroyed by an act of God, wind, flood, fire, something like that. If there is a commercial property that exists at the time of adoption of this ordinance that is destroyed in some way because of an act of God, then they will not be required when they come in to rebuild to meet the requirements of this ordinance. However, if there are new zoning or other code requirements that free up space on the property, for instance, I think one of the things I was told by community development staff was that our parking requirements are not as, we don't require as many parking spaces as we used to. So now if they come in to build the same building and those parking spaces aren't required, then that frees up some space on the lot. That space has to be used to plant trees. So they won't be required to meet the full requirements of the ordinance, but they will have a responsibility to plant some trees on the property. And that's it. So I'll be happy to answer any questions, or I know that was a lot to take in. So I'll be happy to fill in any gaps that I can.
First, I'd like to thank you and Tim and the other people that spent a lot of time putting this together, no matter how this comes out. So, but it's kind of onerous here. It's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, to say the least, I'm sure, both for the county and especially for the residents of St. Simons that want to develop on this. I had a question about the removal of a 24-inch tree where you're supposed to have the county staff or whoever come, and if you want to cut it down. And is that a violation then of this ordinance if you do not contact the county?
Yes, sir.
So, and I had under the penalties, you said, is it 60 days in jail or 6 months?
60 days.
I think it's 6 months. I think I misspoke. It's 6
okay.
months.
Yeah, that was right, because it does say 6 months on here. So if you cut down a 24-inch oak tree on your property, you could spend 6 months in jail.
I'll say that.
I doubt that it'll go that far.
Well,
but,
and that's
but that's a possibility.
That's just the standard misdemeanor punishment. So that's the maximum punishment created by state law. That's not Glynn County formulating that.
Okay, maximum punishment. All right. How does, you can use your buffer areas to meet these requirements then, like on commercial areas that you're trying to do it? I mean, it meshes in with that.
Yes, sir.
I thought about like the Winn-Dixie Plaza over on St. Simons. If they wanted to do either a renovation or an addition possibly into a section out there, will it only be that area where they're doing the renovation or addition that has to comply with this tree ordinance?
I would think it would be the area that's shown on the site plan. Let's say you come in for a site plan approval, the area that's affected by that site plan. And again, that might be a situation where, because of the circumstances that are there, they may need to try to take advantage of some off-site plantings in order to comply. We do have, one of the things that I've been thinking of is we do have, the criteria for using off-site planting is that there's something unusual about that piece of property that makes it difficult to comply with the requirements of the ordinance. I think that would be one of those categories where the Iowa Planning Commission could look at that and say, well, this site is already developed. There's not really a way for them to meet the requirements of this ordinance on site, and then they could utilize the off-site compliance method to meet their requirements.
Well, I was just thinking if somebody wanted to add on 10 feet to the end of the building, what requirements are they going to have to comply with the tree ordinance if that area is either already just grassed or it's asphalt, possibly?
Well, again, I guess it would depend upon if it triggers a site plan or not. If it only triggers a building permit, the building permit has an exception that if you're not going to disturb any trees that exist or put something in an area where there's already existing trees, then you can, those types of building permits don't require that you get a tree plan. If it's not going to actually, for instance, if you're changing out your junction box or something like that and you've got to go pull a permit, that's not going to affect any trees. You don't have to go through this process before applying for that building permit.
Okay. You might become a permanent member of the Community Development Department here.
I think I already am.
She already is. Yeah.
Well,
I've got a question. How do you determine who's responsible? The homeowner, the contractor, the tree cutter? Are you just pursuing all three, or?
Right. I think, depending upon the violation, some will be more obvious than others. You'll know who, in some instances you'll know who the violator is. I think we will be taking that approach, though, that, if it's the tree trimmer and the property owner, we're not going to just cite one or the other. We're going to cite both. And one of the things that was discussed by the committee was, historically, I'll say that sometimes the fines for violation of our zoning ordinances have not been very low, and they've not been much of a deterrent to property owners or other people. It's just the cost of doing business. Hopefully, the minimum fines that we've imposed and some of the other more stringent penalties will deter some of that action. One of the things that was discussed by the committee was if a tree trimming company is getting paid a certain amount to take down a tree or something like that, and they may get hit by a $500 or $700 or $900 fine, that may be more of a deterrent. And right now, it's not clear in our ordinances that you could cite a tree trimming company for violation of the current St. Simon's tree ordinance.
So my question is, once you violate the ordinance and you get whatever fine that you're assessed, will you still have to conform to the ordinance?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then subsequent violations would then become a second and third violation? Is that the way I understand you're answering his question?
Right. So, and those would become more violations. And again, we would have other mechanisms in the ordinance, pulling permits, issuing stop work orders, things like that to make, rather than just collect the fine and let the person go on their way, there'd be other enforcement mechanisms in the ordinance to force their compliance.
Mr. Chairman, I can make a comment, having been on this committee for a year. I'd like to pay homage to our chairman for that, Mr. Worley's wonderful job of taking as diverse personalities as you could imagine in a group, especially on the first day, and blending those together to come up with a solution that's not emotional, it's scientific. And I know when you see all the numbers up there, you start going, oh my Lord, it's like doing taxes. Okay. The gentleman in the probably the cornerstone of this entire ordinance is sitting in the back corner back there, trying to hide the best that he can, Mr. Gardner, Dr. Gardner, and he is really going to be the one that you have to channel and conduit through, whether you're a developer, a large property owner on St. Simon's of an acre or larger, or if you have a 24-inch diameter at breast height tree that you feel you need to cut down because of a good reason, all you got to do is run it through him. He'll come out, take a look at it, could very well agree with you, go ahead and do it and get it done. You have the blessings of everyone. Now, you say this, why are we even doing this? Okay, it sounds like another layer of putting something on people. It's because St. Simon's Island has got several great things going for it. One is beaches, one is tree canopy. Without someone at some point in time saying, we are going to take a look at preserving that second item, okay, the tree canopy, you are 50 years out, Dr. Gardner, affecting the canopy, short of a hurricane of some magnitude. What you do development-wise, what you do in your own backyard, it takes time to see a change in the canopy. So when you get to the point and go, like my hair is thinning, okay, when I realize that it is, all right, it's really too late to do anything about it. Okay, it's happened. All right? But we're at that point where we're addressing a tree canopy that's roughly at about 63%, roughly. Okay. That's fantastic. That's huge in the tree canopy world, okay? The target is to allow that to get no lower than 50%. How do you do that? You take 25% of all the remaining property on St. Simon's Island that's going to be developed of an acre or greater, and you say, I'm going to put trees in it that are going to produce 50% canopy on that property. You're going to end up with 50% as your minimum as the canopy comes down over time, as nature thins it out, okay? So the timing of it is critical. It's not something we can just snap our fingers and say, well, we'll just change the ordinance, and then all of a sudden, tree canopy will go back up to 65%, because it won't happen. Okay? So that's why the committee was put together. That's why it's a St. Simon's item, far more so than the mainland. I don't know what it'll ever do, if anything, in the mainland. But the critical part is that island that's bound by water all the way around it, to preserve that canopy to no less than 50%. And the people who served on it did an excellent job in understanding that, whether they liked the idea, didn't like the idea, agreed, didn't agree, that we did all come together, that this is by far the smartest solution to achieve that. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
I guess I have a question about the lots that don't meet the requirements, and if you wanted to combine two lots, substandard lots, to build on, you'll be required to go through the tree ordinance, correct?
If there's an existing building across, so if you have a house that sits on two substandard lots and you want to tear that house down, you'd have to comply with the tree ordinance. If you've got two substandard lots and you're combining them into one, if you're less than an acre, assuming that there's no building built across the lot lines, then you're okay.
So it's just for a rebuild, where that
Tear down, or if you want to tear it down, if you want to tear down that
tear it down and
house
separate the lots.
and separate the lots, then you're going to have to adhere to the.
Okay.
to
If
the
you want to
tree
tear it down and put it back where it was at?
If you want to tear it down, you're going to have to adhere to the tree
Even though
plan.
you're not splitting the lots, you're
Correct.
still required, as long as they are lots that don't meet our current zoning requirements.
Substandard lots.
Substandard, right.
The reason for that is, there was a discussion by the committee of infill and the practice of going in, tearing down houses that are sitting on substandard lots and then putting two or three in its place. We didn't want to lose a whole lot of trees in that scenario. As Mr. Murphy alluded, the committee was made up by a diverse group, and we had folks on either end of the spectrum as far as who wanted what. And so the positions that are that encapsulated in this ordinance are, for the most part, I don't say we had total agreement on a lot of provisions, but we had a consensus that these are the things that everyone could agree on, everyone could live with, and that they felt that the Board of Commissioners could live with and hopefully adopt at some point.
Right. It's well, I like the idea that there are some formulas to it, and for St. Simon's, I think this is probably going to be a good thing. The biggest thing I'm concerned about is really private property rights. People being able to do what they want with their property, cut down a tree, that sort of thing. And I'd be more than happy to hear from some of the other commissioners on this.
I had two questions. One, the penalties, you got three phases of penalties. Is, for instance, somebody comes in and clears a lot. That's the first time they've done that. Is that the same as somebody going and cutting one tree? Is that the same penalty?
You're saying would that one act as two different?
No, the one act, if it's the first time somebody comes in and clears a lot, like just
Without getting a
without
tree
getting
plan
permit,
approved.
You know, was that be penalty one, even though it's the first time? Would that be the same as someone who's come in and cuts a tree down without a permit?
Right. So any violation of the ordinance, whether it be cutting one tree that you're not supposed to cut or clearing the whole lot, it would be one violation, would be the first violation. And then if there was any subsequent violations of that by the same person or entity, then those are second and third, and hopefully no more than three, no more than one, hopefully, but hopefully we want to get into 4 and 5 and 6.
The 6-inch size, is that any tree or just oaks?
That is any tree that is not a invasive, non-native tree.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Gene, the difference with the 1 acre scenario that you just put in there, more than likely that's either of a larger residential development or a very large house, could be single family of 1 acre, commercial, or industrial, okay? Well, they're going to have a building permit to go forward. If they go in and clear that lot, they're going to be up against the penalty, okay? But that's not the worst part. They're going to get an immediate stop work order. Project stop, is dead. You're not going to do anything with that. As opposed to the gentleman that steps out on a Saturday morning with his chainsaw and cuts the wrong tree down, as far as wrong being it's a specimen tree, it's greater than 24 inches in diameter. Pretty tough to kind of incidentally cut that down, but you know, he's not going to get a order that says you can't occupy your home anymore, you can't do any work around your house, you can't take out the trash, whatever. So that's a huge difference. So it's not that the penalties are the same. We have a penalty that, no, it's not a fine, that stop work order, but to someone who's working by the hour or working by the project and time is money, that's a huge penalty.
I was going to, about a specific instance, not on the island. I live in Royal Oaks, and we had a homeowner 10, 12 years ago who put in a permit to build a house, and the house plans were approved, but they clear-cut the lot, and they cut 15 huge oak trees. I mean, you know, some of them, you know, 300 years old when King George was here, and some of them small, but and it was just, it's an eyesore in the neighborhood now because it's a cleared lot. And I was just wondering if that would be the same first violation as if someone came in and incidentally or accidentally or incorrectly, or whatever we want to put it, cut the wrong tree down. That'd be an egregious violation, but.
Right. I think some of that's probably going to be in the prosecutorial discretion of the code enforcement officers and things like that. I don't know if Pam wanted to speak to that.
Yes, sir. If I could add, one thing we're doing actively is we're building a stronger partnership with the Tree Advisory Board. And when we have violations now, because we don't have the strength of this ordinance, we actually refer the situation to them and ask them to recommend what they think would be an appropriate mitigation to what's been done. And then once we look at that, we've actually taken that to the judge and said, we understand there may be this penalty, but in conjunction with the tree board, we recommend this and are actually getting a little bit stronger penalties right now than normally we otherwise could. So that's something that we would do in working with the tree advisory board, is that difference between clear cutting the whole thing. We would try to get a recommendation that made sure it was equitable mitigation for what had occurred.
Okay, that helps.
And that's really what you're just mentioning, that the tree board has been around, and I couldn't tell you how long. I was on it many years ago for just a fill-in period of 6 months, but was not the most, not because of the members, but I guess the political community, the county as a whole, didn't really look at that board as a board that had the power to regulate anything at the time. They didn't give it that responsibility. It had the ability, it always wanted to, but I don't think it was ever given any tools in which to do that. And I think with this ordinance, that's going to awaken a board that really devotes a lot of time to trees, whether it's in the Mainland or it's on St. Simons. And a lot of very good people on there, and I think it's going to be a huge asset to this ordinance when it's adopted.
Question, we had a downturn several years ago, and there were some subdivisions that got preliminary platted. They may have only done one phase, and they hadn't done any more phases. Now, from what I understand, its preliminary plat was only good for 5 years, 2 years. Yeah. Even though they did one of the phases. So now we're looking at, I can think of one subdivision on the north end that's got a tremendous tree canopy, but for them to have to go through and they want a preliminary plat.
Phase 2 or something like that.
Yeah, let's say 25 acres and locating 6-inch trees and up on that. It's going to be pretty owners. I don't think anybody knows what type of additional expense this might be towards development yet. on it. I know they had done some tree location up there. This is West Point Plantation, actually, up there. And they've got some infrastructure in some of the phases already. But I'm just trying to wrap my arms around what this might do, cost some developers or some tree owners. If somebody had some acreage and they wanted to put a modest home on it, like a 2,000 square foot home, then they have to go through this. Would they have to go through it for the whole site, or would it be recommended that they
If their
do
lot
an
is over
expedited
an acre.
subdivision plat and cut out a 1 acre site or something like that?
You were right, I'm sorry, site plans are 2 years, preliminary plat's 5 years.
Okay.
Yes.
So under your scenario, if their residential lot was over an acre, they'd have to comply, but if it wasn't, then they would not. Incidentally, if their residential lot was over an acre, they'd also have to come in for an LDA permit anyway, which applies to clearing of lots. So they're going to have that responsibility either way. However, if they did want to come in and carve out a 1 acre or less than 1 acre lot, if it's one of those triggers, preliminary plat, expedited subdivision, something like that, and the area that they're starting with is over an acre, then this would apply, and they'd have to meet that requirement on that expedited plat or preliminary plat.
Well, I was thinking other just properties, Jewtown, German Village up there. If somebody had a 2 acre site and they just wanted to put a 1,800 square foot home on it, this seems like a pretty steep requirements to go through for something like that. And if they only wanted to clear, enough for the structure itself, that sort of thing, having to go through all this, or just seems like a lot. But I understand St. Simon's, and we're trying to protect it also. Comments from anyone?
If, say, a hurricane comes through and knocks down several of your trees on your property, and then reduces your percentage of the canopy, do you have to replace them?
There's provision in the ordinance that in the event of something like that, during the emergency itself, the chair of the Board of Commissioners or the county manager can suspend the requirements of the ordinance. I think in the event of that, if you have a commercial development, for instance, and several of the trees are knocked down, there would be a requirement that you come back in and replace those trees under this ordinance. Now, during the actual emergency, that kind of stuff can be suspended. We're not going to expect you to go out there immediately. Yeah.
Could EMS, fire, or someone like that cut down a tree if it was required for the health, safety, and welfare of
Yes, sir.
community?
There's
That
several
wouldn't be a problem.
exemptions. I didn't get into the exemptions to the ordinance. There are several exemptions. One is if it's a project conducted by Glynn County for right-of-way, something like that, that doesn't apply. In the event that the tree itself is a danger to human safety or property, county arborist has to agree with that, but once that determination is made, it can be removed. Airport property is exempt from the ordinance, especially the approach zones and things like that, because obviously you need to keep those clear for the aircraft over there. There's an exemption for utilities in there, similar to the one that we have. We have a tree ordinance now, and I'm using air quotes here, but that there's in the code of ordinances that delineates the powers and duties of the tree board, and there's a provision in there already that talks about utilities trimming trees. So we just took that and put it into this ordinance. We've been contacted by Georgia Power. They were a little concerned about that, so we have that same exemption here.
If, like JWC was putting in a new lift station somewhere and it required a half acre, or this is, I guess, more of a commercial utility use, they would not be bound by the...
Right, so if it's just for utility purposes,
Yeah.
There is an exemption in the ordinance for those types of things.
Anyone else? Questions for staff? Thank you very much. This is a public hearing item. Would anyone wish to speak in favor of this ordinance? Yes, sir.
I'm hoping that someone else will speak. I'm Julian Smith. I still live on St. Simon's Island. I want to thank Mr. Worley for his presentation. And at the end of my comments in support of recommending the adoption of this document, I will want to thank the chair of the MPC for several of his comments. Even though the report that contained the 20-some-odd pages of this draft, this proposed draft, was not available until this morning, and even though I spent all of the morning preparing for and then being on a flight to look at some of the problems in the county, and had only 2.5 hours to read all of the reports, I read them all. I read every page of this report. And some of the questions I heard suggested members of the commission, Planning Commission, may not have read or grasped the some of the exceptions and so on. I don't blame you. This is tedious reading, but it is better than it has any right to be. Mr. Worley's done a very good job. There are some small things I think need correcting. For instance, on page 2, lines 81 and 82, arborist is defined as a person or firm who has been trained in the business of growing, diagnosing, treating, pruning, and removing trees, etc. I would drop the word business, Mr. Worley, or MPC, you can recommend this change, and suggest profession, or even art and craft, or even sacred profession. On page 6, the line 264, one of the exemptions from these provisions will not apply to, quote, land currently zoned and primarily used for agriculture or silviculture, unquote. Now let me give you a worst case scenario. Let's say we have an area that is zoned and used for agriculture, a cattle farm, for instance, that has hundreds of huge old live oaks. The owner of that cattle farm could, under these provisions, unless I'm not reading them correctly, could cut down all of those trees. Or an area in which there's silviculture that includes many old oak trees, many huge cypresses, for instance. The owner could cut them all down and then could apply for a zoning change to create residential land. And I'm hoping that Mr. Worley will correct me if I'm wrong in seeing that worst case scenario as a possibility. And then finally, on page 11, we have the 624.9, protection of Glynn County trees, from lines 476 to 483. And I'll just read you the first two sentences. All trees growing on Glynn County property, including public streets, rights-of-way, Glynn County offices and facilities, parks and recreation areas, and all other public areas shall be protected trees. It shall be unlawful for any person other than Glynn County to cut, remove, move, prune, damage, or cause the death of any Glynn County tree, or to engage in any of the activities described in section 624.8C, etc. I'll give you a worst-case scenario. If I'm correct, the quorum for a meeting of the County Commission is 5 members. 5 members. Mr. Worley, is that correct? 4. 4 members. That would mean 4 members of the County Commission, in the absence of 3 other members, including the members for St. Simon's, for instance. 4 members could decide to remove all of the oak trees and other trees along Frederica Road in order to 4-lane it or 6-lane it, or that stretch of Demery, which has lovely old trees scarred by impacts from cars. That's the worst-case scenario. But the county commission could say, we have a get-out-of-jail-free card. We don't have to go to jail for 6 months or pay any fines because we are the county. So 3 members of the county commission, if there are only 4 or 5 members at the meeting, could decide to remove all kinds of trees, quite arbitrarily, and probably without a public hearing, without the decency of a public hearing. I'll end my comments for thanking the chair for several of his comments. First, he said several times that this proposed ordinance is onerous. And let me read you a definition of onerous, a dictionary definition. Burdensome, arduous, strenuous, difficult, hard, severe, heavy, backbreaking, oppressive, weighty, uphill, challenging, formidable, laborious, Herculean, exhausting, tiring, texting, demanding, punishing, grueling, exacting, weary, and wearisome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying this is an ordinance that is onerous. I also want to thank you for speaking about private property rights. You have demonstrated by your reference to onerous and by waving the sacred flag of private property rights that you are firmly on the side of development. And I don't know why you're worried about a landowner having to survey a lot of land in order to build one house. Aren't you part of a surveying firm? Anyway, finally, when we talk about private property rights, what about the property wrongs? What about the right to do something wrong that hurts your community, that hurts your neighbors, diminishes their pleasure in their own property? So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this ordinance? Please state your name.
Good evening, I'm Pete Schoenauer. I live 102 Driver Morris Street, St. Simons Island. I'm sorry?
Still?
Yes, still. It hasn't changed unless my wife did something behind my back, but I think I need to sign. I promised myself I wasn't even going to look at this new tree ordinance until it was in effect, so I wouldn't get upset, but I was going through the agenda today because of my other items, and I saw it, so I had to indulge. I'm for, a good, manageable tree ordinance, okay? I'm on the side where I've got to figure this stuff out, and I've got to make sure I can make it work, and be an advocate for my client. Right now, the tree ordinance we have, it's pretty easy to accommodate. I haven't come into a situation where it's really been that difficult, so maybe it does need to be beefed up. And I'm not arguing the mechanics of it. I am a little bit. But what concerns me, and it didn't even dawn on me until Mr. Worley's presentation, I kept seeing we need approval from Tree Board, and then we need approval from the IPC before we can even submit for a site plan. I mean, and I'm afraid that all this stuff is going to be too subjective, and I've heard, I don't really think I like it, way too many times from certain planning commissioners, and I think I would rather it be that whoever the county arborist is, that maybe they can administratively say, yes, this meets the requirements, instead of having these unnecessary public hearings on items that aren't public hearings, and it just becomes a mess. And it's going to take, I guarantee you, things are going to be deferred and deferred and deferred. I guarantee it. And it's going to be 6 months before I can even apply for a site plan for a small project on St. Simons Island or a preliminary plat. That's how I see this thing progressing. A good ordinance, but we have to be able to have somebody who can say yes or no, it meets the requirements.
We need a benevolent dictator on the tree board,
Sure.
I guess, pretty much.
Well, yeah, somebody, not this arbitrary, I don't, you know,
Well,
I don't really think so, you know, this is so wishy-washy with the on-site, off-site, you know. I think maybe we need to come up with some, you know, we can go off-site, period. Yes, we can, if we meet these requirements, if there's some specific hardship or whatever. But when we're going before a commission with all this wishy-washy stuff, it's going to be problems for everybody. And it's going to get deferred, and things are going to take years to get approved. Which might be, you know, for some people, you know, an ideal situation, but not where I'm standing. So, and then from the mechanics of it, simple question, and it's what is it called now? Root protection zone? That, you know, the 1,500 square feet per a large canopy tree. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's a 24-inch or 36-inch existing large canopy tree. We've got to show that we've got 1,500 square feet available for an existing tree. Okay, and what does it have to be a circle? Because if it is a circle, then that is roughly a 44-foot diameter circle. So if I've got a tree that is 20 feet off the property line, I really can't justify or say that I'm going to count that tree because 2 feet of that root protection zone is on the neighbor's property or in the right-of-way or
The great thing about it,
building.
it's not the canopy. That's not what the mathematical part, that is the end result of the mathematical part of this ordinance, okay? What they're saying is we no longer want a live oak tree planted in a clay pot. Because you realize it will live. It will survive. It will not grow and give you a canopy that you want.
So we need to... Okay,
hang
I'm
on,
sorry.
hang on.
Okay.
So what we're saying is we're going to control it based on soil, on land, of which scientifically has been proven, and we had the University of Georgia come in, professors giving us detail, and they said the exact same thing over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell you pretty much. Okay, now every tree's like people, you know, we're not all the same height, we're not all the same width, but given X amount of soil, X amount of land, undisturbed.
Undisturbed, right. No
okay,
parking, no anything, absolutely.
this is the result that you will achieve from it when you give it this much soil. That's what we're after, is the soil. The canopy, it could go over the neighbor's yard, it could go over everybody's yard. We don't know. We know what will happen if you allocate X amount of property and soil to that's undisturbed.
Okay. Now, and I get that, and that makes perfect sense for the roots to grow and be healthy. If I have an existing tree that's 10 feet from my property line, can I count that as a large canopy tree? Again, because if I and I believe the ordinance says it's 1,500 square feet measured from the center of the trunk. So again, is that a circle that encroaches onto the neighbor's property? Now, I no longer can say I've got 1,500 square feet dedicated on my property for that one tree.
This is going to make you as happy as you can possibly be. Are you ready for this?
Yes, I am.
You won't have to make that argument, and I'm not saying a mean argument, I'm just saying the presentation of, okay, an argument to a board. You won't have to make it to the tree board. You won't have to make it to a commission. You won't have to address those questions to us. You'll have to address it to Dr. Gardner,
But
who does know the answer to it, okay? All right, and can work with you to say, this is what we can do. Did you realize there's a tree that's got roots that's coming in from another piece of property that's not yours, that we're going to give you credit for? He's going to be the Jedi Master on answering your questions, as opposed to us up here that meet once a month and might not have the greenest thumbs.
Well, I'm actually, and that's what I was actually asking for, is that Mr. Gardner or whoever is going to take that role.
He's it.
Well, then I'm missing a point, because what I'm seeing is he's going to look at it.
No, it has to
initially.
start with him. It doesn't go anywhere until it starts with him.
Right.
Well, it can't.
And then I
move
get
on.
his blessing, but I still need the blessing of the tree board and the IPC.
But
Or
once
am
you
I
got his
seeking-
blessing, you have your questions answered, which is the beauty of it.
No, because I still have to go before the tree board and IPC, right?
But you just asked a question that you will not be asking to a board. You will not be asking it to a commission.
So what is the IPC?
You'll be asking
What
it
is
to Dr. Gardner, who will be answering the question for you about your tree that's 10 feet from the property line. You're not going to be addressing that to people up here. We're not going to have a survey that's going to show that. per se. We might on the site plan if it's that detailed.
So why do we need tree board approval and IPC approval if Mr. Gardner says that, hey, this is a good plan, I like this, scientifically, this works? That's where I'm going to hear a lot of subjective comments from the audience and the commissioners.
The same reason why you step through government from one level to the next level to the next until you finally get to the top guy who gives you the final approval.
Which is IPC.
In that case would be IPC. That is correct. That is how it was requested to be. It's how they want it to be. And if this is adopted and voted on by our elected officials, the Board of Commissioners, that's the way it will be. But you certainly have the right to say, I don't like it that way. And maybe by saying that, because you certainly have the experience, that the Board of Commissioners, when they do vote on that, could very well change that there's not that many layers. Okay?
Right, I guess that's my concern, is that we've got many layers of subjective input, and where I, as an engineer, I can do it from a scientific standpoint all day long, and or tell my client it works or it doesn't work. But when somebody says, or can arbitrarily say, I just don't like it, I don't have an answer for that. So I'm trying to avoid that if
and that's
possible.
what we've tried to stay away from. We tried to get it to where it's in the hands of someone like a Dr. Gardner who can give those calculations to you. He has a basis. If he has to testify in front of us or make comment in front of us, he has the basis. He's worked with you. He knows what to say. You understand it. It can be presented to us. We're probably the weak link is what you're trying to say, but you're being so polite about it that I very much appreciate it. But we will be the weak link. In our case, our sister board on our commission on St. Simon's. But I think as enough of them get going on it, it's going to be a situation where Dr. Gardner has approved this. It went to the county tree board. They approved it. Okay, it's flowing now. It's not stopping. It's flowing, I hope.
Is there any talk about how do you handle a deferral, or what would give either the tree board or the IPC a reason to defer something? Again, if it's supported by Mr. Gardner and he's there to support it, again, my experience with the IPC is you don't know what you're going to expect on any given evening.
Right. It sounds like it's just supposed to be a check the box. It meets the requirements, more or less.
The work should
the way it's supposed to be.
It gets to them, but
right. It meets the requirements, or it doesn't on that.
Anyway, I guess you're aware of what my concern is. Sure. I'm not opposed to a good, strong tree ordinance by any means.
Okay. So your comments were in favor of, or were they just kind of concerns?
In favor of a tree ordinance that can be managed objectively without a bunch of opinions, that we base it and keep it on the science side of things, which was, I think, a big effort was made to do that. That
the whole basis of it, really.
is that we're doing this scientifically. So I'd like to keep it scientific, not arbitrary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Numbers don't lie. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Yes, ma'am. Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. I'm Miriam Lancaster. I live at 124 Palm Drive, St. Simons. I was a member of the committee, and as Mr. Murphy said, it was quite an experience. It was actually 2 years.
Time flies.
Yeah, you forget. It's kind of like childbirth. You forget about it afterwards. But let me just answer a couple of the concerns that have been raised, and then let me tell you why we need what we need. I think first, the fact that the current one is so easy is one of the reasons why we need a stronger tree ordinance, because what you've seen across the island is that it had very, very narrow application. It did not apply to fee simple developments, for example, of many, many acres. You very rarely saw a tree plan come before the IPC under the current legislation. For one thing, I think that Will did not mention in his presentation, tree plan approval will not be a public hearing item. It will be very similar to plat approvals, site plan approvals, where staff, and in this case it would be Dr. Gardner, would make that recommendation. So it is a science-first approach, and the whole goal, and the goal with any good tree ordinance, is to have the developer come in advance to work through those issues with the arborist as the professional, and so that when the tree plan gets to the bodies that have to approve it, who are not the experts, all those concerns have already been addressed, whether on-site or off-site planting is available, what types of trees. Right now, we have a tree ordinance where sometimes the site plan will show a palm tree, but the tree is actually a live oak. And unless someone has been to the site and investigated, they don't know what's there. So this will, in essence, provide protection for the trees that we have. Over the last 15 years, we have lost our tree canopy on St. Simons at a rate 5 times faster than we did in the preceding 25 years. We are now at about a 62% tree canopy. If we don't do anything, we could be well below 50% by 2020. As I said, this was a compromise. Excuse me, there were some people, and there are many, many communities where you cannot cut a single tree of a certain size without approval on existing property or developing property. You know, when people say we don't want to be Hilton Head, take a look at Hilton Head's tree ordinance if you want the definition of what some people consider to be onerous. In Hilton Head, you cannot remove a tree of any size without permission, whether it's in your yard, whether it's on a development site. But yet, their property values have increased. They have a Walmart on Hilton Head that complied with their tree ordinance. It is very, very doable. Communities like Savannah, Beaufort, Bluffton, all have strong tree ordinances, Charleston, and they all have growing communities and high property values. We can't afford to let our tree canopy diminish. We are out there promoting it 7 days a week. Just look at what the Chamber of Commerce is doing. Convention and Visitors Bureau. Look at what the realtors say. In every listing, if you've got a tree, it's going to say, nestled among the live oaks. So it's very important that we keep this tree canopy. It is one of the drivers of this community. There's actually Photos, one of my favorite quotes is Photos, the travel magazine said, "We came for the beach, but we stayed for the trees." And that's why we need to preserve the canopy. Stormwater management, we are woefully behind on maintaining our stormwater system on St. Simons. A live oak tree in a storm event will suck up that stormwater. It is the best stormwater management system we could possibly have. Erosion control, same thing. Privacy, air quality. When you have a 6,000 square foot lot, your private property rights are affected by what your neighbor does. And that's where trees become a great buffer and make good neighbors and improve people's property values and protect people's property rights. So I would ask that you recommend that the Board of Commissioners adopt this ordinance. I think that Tim was probably kind of in the middle of the group. I was actually called at a public hearing a grandma tree hugger by one of our local developers. I think that this is a compromise, and it certainly doesn't impact one side or the other too greatly. We will lose some trees as a result of this, but that's a result of people having their private property rights. We will save some trees, and hopefully we will grow our canopy as a result of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak against this ordinance? And before we finish, Dr. Gardner, it's getting late, but if you'd like to say something, I'd allow you 5 minutes. If you don't want, that's fine. Since you're a major player in this whole thing.
All right, Don Gardner, I am the agriculture agent here for University of Georgia. I am a certified arborist. I'm also track certified, which is tree risk assessment qualification. In my previous life, I was park and tree director for the city of Savannah, Georgia for 16 years, took care of the squares, downtown, all the trees, the riverfront, all that stuff. So I'm familiar with what trees can do and how they can fit into urban sites. I've also seen the creative ways that trees can be made to disappear when people don't like them. So a lot of that went into this ordinance. The objective of the ordinance is not to make us pretty. It's to make the trees that are saved safe for the community. The county has largely been silent on the issue of trees on development sites. And because of that, we have not incurred, the county has not incurred any liability. But if we are going to talk about trees in the community and talk about trees being saved on sites, we need to make sure first that they are safe for the people in the community. The reason we have the minimum sizes for planting is that is the best evidence we have so far, the best data we have so far on how much rooting space we have to have so a tree that's going to be of small stature, a tree that's going to be less than 25 feet at maturity, will be properly anchored to withstand gale force winds. A minimum tree is going to have that larger area, and a large tree, 1,500 square feet, to make sure it is properly anchored so it doesn't blow over on somebody when they could be out and about. So it's about safety, not about beauty. It's also about getting that canopy that we're looking for. The ordinance does not say that you cannot cut down a tree. That's not the focus. The focus is to make sure we have enough of that soil resource so that each lot, if possible, can produce the canopy to maintain a 50% canopy over the community. So everybody, pulls their share of the weight. And so that's why we're looking at the 25%. It's not data that we made up. We got the registered foresters and urban foresters for the Georgia Forestry Commission provided the data to us for the Barrier Islands of Georgia to tell us what our potential for canopy growth was, and we've used that data, that forestry data, so it's not something new that we've made up. It's stuff that 2/3 of the state is in managed timber stands. It's that same science. There's other stuff that will come up as we get involved with this, but we're not telling people they can't cut down trees. We're telling them they've got to make room for trees. So that's our direction. And again, we've been doing this long enough that our Counselor Worley was clean shaven when we started this.
And didn't have all the white.
Thank you. All right, that'll end the public comment section. Yeah. Commissioners? I will entertain a motion, or if you'd like some further discussion before we do that, if you'd like to make a comment. All right. I'll entertain a motion.
I'm on the committee, so I can't feel right to make the motion.
I would make a motion that we approve proposed text with the tree planting.
Second.
Got a motion, got a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by raising your right hand. Opposed? Like sign? It passes. 5-2. Very good. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out on a Monday night, and meeting adjourned.